For turn taking, I would argue that one of the most commonly used would be self selection. Just based off my own experiences, I feel like a lot of times, especially in people you are very comfortable with, or the people you'll typically talk to, self selection kind of makes a lot of sense because you'll be bouncing back and forth from each other, and it doesn't always make sense to have speaker selection with people you're really comfortable with, because it just for ease of flow, jumping back and forth just it makes more sense for the turns to move that way. It has a more equal pattern, more equal movement. And I would say because of that, interruptions and overlap too, even though they're both different, I feel like that also can have are pretty common. Interruptions, especially if you're around lots of loud people, I would say a lot of my friendships are people who have a lot to say. And so there's lots of times it'll be a quick talking over each other, just kind of like the understanding that because of the patterns we have in our interpersonal relationships, it's not deemed like a rude thing necessarily to overlap, despite the fact that's like a violation of typical norms. It's kind of an accepted thing because we know there's no harm, no foul. And for the most part, even if you're interrupted, you're able to say what you want. Same thing with overlap, where there's many times we'll say words over each other, but that doesn't necessarily mean that we're not listening. So I feel like those are very common examples of things people do that I've noticed. I don't know if that's the same for everyone, but that's been my experience for the most part, something I've noticed. And then I'd say one of the ones I see the least would be speaker continuation. And the only examples I can really think of are when people are like in a more professional setting, asking questions to people to see if they have to like still want to know things. So obviously professors, but also like in the workplace setting, for instance, that's the only time I see that. But I feel like it's not utilized as much for the most part. I feel like often there's more speaker selection. They'll fall more on that, where they'll be like, oh, if you don't want to say something, we'll encourage you to, or self selection. So I feel like as far as turn taking goes, speaker continuation, I don't feel like I see quite as much, just from my experience.